Good afternoon, everybody. This is Tim making another video today about the message I've been giving about self-accountability. So far, I've covered self-accountability on reiterating human duality, vision of our reflection, human inheritance, and reciting our possibilities, which is endless. Uh, I've been working on this message to give a clearer picture on the vision of peace that I've been given as I've been reciting what it means to actually be human, and I've been doing it since I've been in a state of mind where I've been connecting myself with God and seeing how He sees His creation. And I've been trying to get people to understand that it takes self accountability to understand what it really means to live, basically. And we have to master ourselves to understand free will as a human being, that we are basically projecting our perception of life, and it's either negative or positive, and God would rather us be positive because He wanted to project heaven, and heaven is positive, it's utopia, it's everything we want, it's everything we want to be, and you have to be it to be able to get it. And having God on my side and how He placed me in a position to be able to articulate self accountability for self preservation, it gave me a new perception of myself and how I was looking to preserve myself, and He gave me the skills and the lessons in my life to be able to show people how it's the lessons in your life that He's giving you to preserve yourself, and you have to pay attention to what He's trying to tell you to be able to project the life that you want, and your heart's desire is in the lesson of self-preservation, because we want to preserve ourselves to be able to live our dream. So as going through my life lessons at 27, He allowed me to awaken and awaken others within myself and in the conscious grid. And He taught me through this Morse code that I didn't know that was there, that now I'm comfortable with telling everybody, because I didn't understand it myself. So it took me a while to study it. So I put the hypothesis in my blog. And I wanted to be able to teach it to others as I get older, be able to master the lesson that He gave me and put it into to be able to put it in a lesson where people can understand the importance of what He's trying to show us as our Creator, and to be able to do it within myself in the conscious grid as a way He was trying to show me. He was trying to show me myself at the same time He was showing me to the world on how He wants the world to operate. And learning the Morse code of His being and how He placed it where we still have free will, it showed me how Jesus Christ walked on this earth. It gave me a bigger perception on how Jesus Christ walked on this earth, because I noticed how He guided people through how His relationship with God was innocent, and He showed us it was a service. He showed us it was through love. He showed us it was through the heart where we lived. And we can't deny that's where we live, because that's the way we're walking through this earth, is by having a heart. And it's emotional, it's physical, it's mental, and you have to pay attention to these aspects of self so you can be able to articulate and elaborate what preserves you and what preserves others, because we are a service to each other as well as a service to God, which makes us God's business partner. And if we don't pay attention to what He's saying, we're basically saying we don't care what God said. I'm gonna do it my way, and I'm gonna do it the way that I put the pieces together on how life should be, because I'm reacting off what life gave me, and that's not how it was supposed to be. I'm supposed to react off what God gave me as a a way to humble myself, I will have to sit my will down and go off of his will, which is reality. His reality is my reality. It's like living a dream within a dream, and his dream is in his will. And we can't walk around saying God didn't say anything when it was just because we didn't notice how he was saying it. And it was through the Morse code that I learned by getting in a place where I felt I was sitting in the dark and noticing and learning through my walk with him, reading my Bible and growing up Christian. It was always taught to me that he was the Father of lights. And it was through reciting my time with him, which I got my lessons out of, because I always learned to give him the last pun to whatever situation I was in. And reciting is to repeat out loud or declaim from memory before an audience, and being placed in the conscious grid, he gave me the audience of the world and placed me in front of the world to recite our relationship, which will give people an idea of what kind of relationship they can have with the Creator. And being able to reiterate what we've been going through my 30 years of being here on this planet, it was interesting on how he was able to open and teach me how to stay open within myself, being able to be open as he is open, because he never closed the door towards me. No matter what situation or what I did, he always said I can always come to the throne and make my requests be known, because he is the omnipotent one, and he does listen, he does care, and he does want to help us get to a place where we don't have to scrap for things that we need or things that we want. It's okay to have wants, but we have to make sure we could take care of the things that we actually need to survive, to get to appreciate the things that we want. And seeing how Jesus walked on the earth to open people's eyes on the character of God by being able to be open to say he's the Son of God, it was an eye-opener on the opportunity he gave me, where I can say I'm also a son of God, and he has no problem claiming me as his son. And it was that eye-opening experience with him that showed me that you guys are also his kids. But it gave me an opportunity to see you guys. As I was growing up, I admired everybody. I admired the way you guys showed your talent. I admired the way you guys presented yourself. I admired the way you guys presented the way you perceived life. And not everybody perceived it in a positive way, but I took the lessons out of the people who also seen life as a negative way, as a lesson to not go that way. It was never a good ending for them, but it also gave me a perception of our ego's way of consuming the idea of what life could really be like if I was to give God my all. And being able to give God my all means I have to stay as open as he is, because I am his reflection, and you have to be his reflection for him to shine through you so somebody else can see what the light is really like. And you can't be scared of it because you feel like you're going to burn, or you're going to fall, or you're going to miss out on something that was actually not really there, or it could have been more than what you thought. You don't know unless you let go and let God. So we have to be self-sustained, which strengthens the intellect, and we have to have self-accountability, which is self-mastery, and we have to learn self-preservation, which helps us become self-sufficient. And seeing how Jesus became God's apprentice, it showed me how I became God's apprentice by articulating self-preservation from self to others, because we're mirroring each other. If I don't see remorse, or I don't see pain, or I don't see joy, or I don't see sadness or depression on somebody else, that means I've closed my eyes to what reality really is, because it's genuine. Those are genuine emotions, and I can't manipulate somebody and detour them with the idea of it's my way or no way, and I'm changing your demeanor. And I don't have no right to change your demeanor because I didn't create you. That's not my place. So I will have to see you for who you really are. And in manipulating somebody, to me, that's a place of evil, a place of darkness, because basically I'm changing you to what fits me, which was slavery to me. And I had never agreed with slavery, and God didn't either, as it was placed in the Bible and placed in our history, which showed me that changing somebody's demeanor and to my will was I was trying to play God, and that makes me a poser, and I don't want to be a poser, and that was that view of me was not a view that I wanted to see on myself. So that view of myself I didn't want on myself because it will make me look vindictive, and that demeanor God does not. That demeanor God looks down upon because He is trying to project He's trying to project His demeanor onto us by having a perception where we can see heaven through. I would say see heaven through the eyes of the heart, and by closing the door to your demeanor and how you're presenting yourself emotionally means I'm really not looking at the real picture of who you really are. And being in a vindictive mindset, I'm really being vindictive to God's perception of reality, which means I'm not really having a clear relationship with my Creator, and seeing how God has no problem voicing His opinion to His creation. I'm deliberately going against His will, and His will is what keeps us alive, because He's trying to tell us that the pun was that He gave us everything, every resource, every space, every inch of our being came from Him, and we have to be able to utilize it. And being vindictive, I'm depleting His elaborative thought of resources. He elaborated that all the resources are ours. We just have to learn how to utilize it between each other. And being a person that's trying to change your demeanor, I am trying to deplete one of God's resources, which is one of God's instruments. And I have to realize that I'm God's instrument to understand that you're God's instrument as well. So to change your demeanor would be messed up. And as we go through history, we've seen that we've tried to change each other's demeanor. As far as slavery was actually a way to feel like I'm in a higher position than you are, so you have to look up to me, and you have to pull from my intellect to survive, which means I have to put you in a box where you feel like you're useless, you feel like you don't mean anything, and the only way you're going to survive if you do as I tell you from my intellect, even though I'm limiting you to certain parts of the intellect that was provided to all of us, which means I'm deliberately trying to block God's intellect from you, which means I am trying to deplete God's instrument which He placed in your heart, which means I'm trying to deliberately control your heart and your mind to my will, and that's not God's will. And that means that I put a dual perception in your mind that God's intellect versus my intellect is a I'm placing a thing in you where you're fighting against yourself, whether it's God's intellect that will get me out of my situation, or is it your will that will get me out of my situation. And seeing how God placed us all as His instrument, He placed us all as the royalty, kings and queens, which means it was not our will that got us through our times of hardship. It was God's will, and it was oppression that we were fighting against it was oppression that we were fighting against, not the people. Basically, it was not color, it was not gender, it was oppression. It was an idea. It was somebody's idea of logic that placed me in a box, and it was my will that allowed it to place me in the place of darkness because I had to see God for myself. And the people who saw outside other people's intellect of oppression were the ones who stood up and fought for people who could not see it. It was my will to stand up to become the light and see that freedom was actually real, which gave people hope, and that light was actually God's light. And oppression was hard on the mind, and it was hard on the heart, which hardened our heart, which closed our heart, and we had two different perceptions, which is why I said human duality. It was actually the knowledge of good and evil. Which perception am I supposed to go off of? Is it God's or yours? And I always would pick God's because his heart towards me will always be of peace. His thoughts of me will always be of peace. So who are you to tell me who I am through your intellect, even though it's not. It wasn't, you're not my creator, and my creator told me that I can live within myself and be myself and be free and preserve myself for others to see that his will is real. And for me to walk on this planet not knowing who I am, it puts you in a place of, is God real? Because how can I be myself and be oppressed at the same time? It was through his intellect that we were ignoring, and it gave me personally a sense of who am I, why am I, how am I, and when am I. It was conscious time that taught me that I can be myself as long as I keep God's law within my heart. And seeing how we were oppressing each other off our own intellect, it showed me how we were ignoring our Father's will. And there was so many of us doing that, we had a hard time seeing each other. And that's not right, and that's not the way we should go, because it will deplete us if we continue to not see each other in the way we should be seeing each other. And seeing how I got the honor of sitting in God's will and in his presence and being able to articulate his Morse code, I can tell you who his character and who he is and what he said, what it is and what it ain't. And I have no problem doing that, because oppression and racism was never a reality, because he told me that it wasn't real. And if he said it's not real, then it's not real. And if you tell me it's real, that means you're going against God's will, and that's not my problem. So seeing how we have our perception and our different opinions on what it should be, it should always stick to what God said it is. If he says nay, it's nay. If he said it's yes, it's yes. But it will always be to preserve his creation. So seeing how we have poverty, it should be our will to elaborate how to utilize the resources we have to help others as well as it helps ourselves. So we have to stick together and get rid of our own issues and our own hang-ups and our own opinions that oppress others, because it's not our right to oppress somebody else because we feel like they're not the right gender, they're not the right sex, they're not the right race. It's not my place, because I did not place you here. You didn't place me here, so you can't tell me what purpose God gave me. The purpose God gave me was to help articulate and elaborate what preserves you, because in my life I had a hard time finding my place in life, so I can understand where a lot of people come from, where they feel like they're lost and they feel like they're never going to get out of their circumstance, when I can say God told me that we're all wealthy. We just have to learn how to utilize the resources through the intellect, but it's up to me to actually learn the compounds of the resources. Sometimes that's hard because we don't know how we learn. I had to learn how I learned. It was how I took in people's way of trying to critique me, but me seeing how life was at a young age. Not saying I had the worst life, but it was me seeing how people's demeanor and seeing how people like to play with each other's emotions and like to play with each other's minds. I had a kind of a defense up towards other people. And I don't know if that was a thing that hindered me from excelling my way to success, but it did affect me on how I allowed people to come in my life and how I allowed them to affect me. And I didn't want people to affect me by oppressing who I really was as Tim. And I feel like people play with each other's mind to get what they want. And not saying everybody do it, but majority of us play with each other's emotions and play with each other's thoughts to get their own will done. And that's not right. That's playing with somebody's being. And I feel like that affects our marriages, that affects our family, that affects our cities, that affects our states and countries. We're not really looking at the heart of the matter. We're looking at what can I get out of this situation, and that's okay if you're looking at how I can get out. What can I get out of the situation to help others? It was a service as Jesus Christ taught us, but I had to master myself on what I really wanted, and what I really want is what God really wants, and that's what puts me in my place as a humble man and humble myself before God. And a lot of us don't know how to humble ourselves because we feel like somebody owes us something. You owe me this, you owe me that. I don't care what you think. I don't care how you feel. I'm going to just treat you any kind of way. And that's not right. And people do it in their marriages. Why did you get married if you just wanted it your way? You married someone else who's trying to preserve and find love too. But if you're just sitting there to oppress them to get what you want out of the situation, that marriage is not going to last. And as a man, you should be able to put your ego aside, to put your family first, because you're the man who want to preserve and protect your family. You got to put that ego aside to be able to see what God wants for that family. He gave it to you, so you might as well take care of it. So in that, you have to look at if you're putting your ego before God's will, and the ego's will is not always the right way to go, because it tends to say me all the time, and it's not about you all the time. And once you get that, you'll be able to see that God puts you in a place where He took care of you. He put you in His bosom. He took care of every resource that He wanted to give you and have given you and will always give you. So being able to take that, what He gave you, and to give it to others, that would make you a man of God. So you have to sit there and look at what are you doing with what God gave you. And we have to look at society. What did God give me that I can give to you? So I have to sit myself aside and sit myself down to be able to elaborate what God gave me to give to you. And what He gave me is a chance to give a lot of love to the world and show you a depiction of what we're actually doing. And we're actually in a place where we can critique what we're doing and take out what we're not, put in what we're not doing, and take out what we're doing that's depleting us, such as poverty. We don't have the lack of wisdom to put poverty in its place and put crime in its place, because it's poverty that's actually putting us in a place of survival mode. We have to look at our cities and wonder why so many people on the streets can't feed themselves. My idea on how we can get that off the ground is being able to put agriculture in the schools, to be able to teach people how to grow their own food just in case they come into a situation where they can't feed themselves. And so we won't have to keep being codependent on systems that might fail us, so we're in a mindset of survival because we feel like I'm going to deplete soon, and I'm in pain. I'm in emotional pain. I'm in mental pain, and I'm about to be in physical pain, starving to death because I don't have the intellect to feed myself. Which means we need space to be able to have, for people to grow their own food and just naturally, organically recycle what the ways we can grow our own food and grow resources, and be able to share the intellect on what preserved each other. We have to stick together and get rid of our hang up so we can actually see what's going on, which leads to crime, because I feel like people tend to go to crime and theft because they feel they're scared that they're gonna die in pain. They're in pain. We have to heal, create, and prosper from the resources that God gave us. And then it's take self accountability to be able to gain the intellect to be able to do so. Because if I'm not gaining anything, I can't give anything, and it's my responsibility to do so. But it's my responsibility to look at myself and see how I'm treating somebody. If I'm treating you like crap, that means I'm going against God's will on what He gave me. He gave me enough love to give you. And every time He answers me, it's an answer of love. So I can't sit there in His face and say He did not give me that answer of love to not give to you. So I took the time out of my life to sit here and articulate why I have to treat you like shit. And it's basically sort of a norm on how people treat each other like crap. And it should not be that way, because we tend to judge people off things that actually don't matter. And if it don't matter, God said, then don't touch it. He said, I placed it there for a reason, and I gave you a purpose, and I gave you a purpose of love. So why are you not using what I gave you to preserve yourself and preserve others, so that we can all live in heaven that I projected through you and for you? So you're gonna have to be able to sit back and look at how you treating yourself and how you treating others. And this is actually interesting seat to be sitting in, to be able to articulate God's Morse code, because it showed me a depiction of humanity, and we're not actually utilizing all the resources we have, because we have more love than we can imagine. We're just not utilizing it because we have our own opinions and we have our own way of doing things, because we feel like we have to be stuck in this place because we feel like it's safe. Well, I'm preserved. I don't know about you, but that should not be the mindset. My mindset should be, I'm preserved, so let me preserve you, so we all can be preserved as one. It's one in the all and the all in the one. We have to be on one accord, and if we're not on one accord, we're going to surely die. So it's up to you on how you want to take God's word and how you want to apply it to your life and how you want to apply it to somebody else's life. But if they take it in a negative way, all you can do is show love. It's not up to you on how they take it. That's the self-accountability. They're going to have to turn around and take God's word as well as you took it. Sometimes God's plans is not easy to take, but you're going to have to take it for somebody else to understand on how they can stand up. You have to be able to walk this journey in a state of mind that God has you in His heart, and He will never let you fall. And you're going to have to be fearless and be able to be strong within yourself. And you can't be weak and fall for anything that comes along, because you're desperate for something that you feel like you need, which you have to put in perspective. Is that the thing that you're desiring depleting you, or is it preserving you? Sometimes we get in this relationship thinking that somebody's going to do something for you when they don't really owe you anything. You owe yourself something. So it takes two whole people to get together. And if one person is halfway and the other person is whole, one person is holding the weight of love, and they're going to feel like they're dragging you along with them, because you're not really putting in the effort of making this thing work. And it takes a lot of work, and it's worth it in the end, and it's rewarding to be able to put in work and get the harvest that you placed in. We have to invest in each other, and you have to know that you're worth it to be invested in. He invested in us already. He's just calling His harvest back, and He gave us the same method. I'm actually calling my harvest back that I've placed in people, that I've been placing a lot of wisdom out there where people can get up on their feet and see who God really is. And I've been placing a lot of love into people, and I've been investing, and I've been studying. I've been trying to get a picture of what heaven could be really like if we get over ourselves, and seeing how Jesus was walking this earth to show us who we really are, it showed me that he was a apprentice that assisted God in conscious genocide, basically, which is the deliberate killing of a large group of people to save the existence of humanity. Basically, God wanted to save humanity, but he would have had to commit genocide, basically, and the first depiction of that would have been the flood. But the conscious genocide was to kill humanity's ego, which would have depleted us, because if we all were only looking at self, we would have never seen each other. And Jesus was sent here to die on the cross so we could see each other's innocence. It was the innocence that kept creation alive. We had to see the innocence within ourselves, because they were back then barbaric, slaughtering babies. And that was that should have been a clue within itself, because that was our future. How else were we going to project the future if we were killing it? And that's a scary mindset to be in, because you're not looking at yourself to think that was okay. And we're still doing things today that we think is okay. That's absolutely not okay. And I wanted to be God's assistant as well, because I've been noticing how we were since a little boy, and I always ask the question, why do we act the way we act knowing that God's here? It was human skepticism that kind of blinded us to what God was really saying. And human skepticism can go so far when you're actually talking to the one who's projecting reality. So you have to see where you place in that ego, and who you trying to push out the way. Because if you're trying to push God's will out the way, you're going to have to realize that you can never push God out the way. You can't put God in the box, and you cannot change his demeanor. And that's why it's not right to change somebody else's demeanor, because he gave us our own demeanor and our own self within our own being. And he said he gave us all love. So if we're not all acting in love, or we're all not giving love, we're going to have a lack of love, or we're going to have famine of love. So if we're all giving love, then we'll all have it. So what were we complaining about? We just have to learn how to utilize the resources that he gave us. So seeing as God committed genocide without killing our physical being and still giving us a chance to live, that means he gave us grace and mercy to live it every day, which means we should be thankful every day. We should be walking in grace. We should be thankful. We should be humble. We should be walking, talking, thinking, feeling the love within myself, so I can be able to give it. And in this mindset, it does put a depiction of our human demeanor in my head, of how we speak and how we walk. And I do see things that could be changed, but I don't look at it as I don't judge it on how other people judge it. I keep my door open so I can be able to articulate what's wrong in the picture and what's right in the picture. And what's wrong is what God says is wrong, and what's right is what God says is right. And if I sit here and say a wrong is right, that means I settled for something that wasn't real. So I'm going to keep stumbling over something that's not even there, but asking God, why am I keep stumbling, until I fix that perception of what he told me to fix. It's going to always be that way, because it was never reality. We have to understand he's pushing reality, not us. We are pushing our way of life through history of what others taught us, and that's what we stick to until we can learn how our Father is communicating to us. So I'm glad he taught me his way of communication. I'm glad he taught me how to humble myself. I'm glad he taught me how to keep the door open. And it's our struggle on keeping our heart open, because we're scared to fall and get hurt. But we have to notice that that's what's actually hurting us. We're walking in fear of each other instead of loving each other. We keep bumping heads and going after each other for blood, for reasons that aren't real, and we're going to have to take account for it one day or another, whether it's today or whether it's tomorrow. And you don't know when is your last breath, and you're going to have to stand in front of God and say, did I use everything that you gave me, or did I set it to the side and do whatever I wanted to do? which means I place my will before yours. So do I have a place in your house? In your house, yes or no? And it's always going to be his yes or no, whether we like it or not. So you're going to have to put your life in a perspective if you're utilizing everything God gave you. And seeing how it's our job to contribute to society, it takes a real person of God's stature to be able to stand up in front of a whole lot of people openly and be honest on who they are, so you can see how he really is. And I've grew up in Los Angeles my whole life, and I've grew up in a family where things were allowed, and they affected me in a way where it confused my perception of God in certain times in my life. But he always came back and showed me who he was, which was a giver. And I always put his will in his mind always intrigued me, and I admired that. And seeing how his demeanor never changed and people's demeanor changed, it taught me how to be still by his demeanor, because our demeanor was so wishy-washy. Even myself, I didn't want to become vindictive towards you, and I didn't want to become vindictive towards him, because I always wanted to be myself. I wanted to be peaceful. I wanted to live my dream just like anybody else. But if we're changing each other's demeanor all the time, it's going to be hard to see what that dream actually really is. It's a bigger dream attached to individual dreams. And once we get on one accord, we'll be able to connect our individual dreams to the one who's projecting our dreams and manifesting our dreams and manifesting the success and utilizing all the resources and opening the door for the next generation to come in and utilize their gifts and their dreams, and they can utilize what God gave them, so we can see a better future, and we can see that God really projected heaven, but it's in our future. And our future is within us, literally, physically, emotionally, mentally. And the physical part is when we do multiply. He made us to multiply, but we have to understand that they're not behind us just because they're younger than us. They're actually ahead of us, because they're going to continue on as we deplete. Because I'm getting older. I'm older than I was yesterday, and I have to realize that I'm getting older tomorrow, and I'm going to get older the next day. So what is it going to take me to put my ego aside so they will be okay? And that's why he had to commit genocide, so the future would be preserved. And that was the algorithm of the Morse code. It's attached to self-preservation, because ironically he wanted to preserve me, and he wanted to preserve the future, and anybody that comes out of me, he gonna then want the same from them. So I'm gonna have to become a guide, teach them how to preserve themselves by guiding them towards him. This is God's structure. This is his yay. This is his nay. So they can take what I've learned from him further, so they can be able to live in the utopia that I desire. And that's when I learned it was not about me. So I have to get over myself. I'm gonna have to humble myself to see that it was God's will always that projected me towards what I wanted and what he wanted and what my kids will want. And then eventually we'll see that he did project heaven from day one all the way until he said his end, because it's up to him. He mastered himself already, so he will have to teach me to master myself, which means I will have to humble myself as his apprentice. And we're going to have to continue the teachings of being able to humble our ego against God's will. And if anybody had the right to have ego, it would be him. But it was his innocence that I saw, that he placed his ego aside to take the patience and the time and the grace to give me, to even show me what reality really was. And So I just wanted to take the time to show you guys how me and God and I communicate, so I can be able to tell you how where we can preserve ourselves and what we can take out that is depleting us, and we're gonna have to get over ourselves. And in the learning the Morse code, I was actually I was actually at the place where I was learning how to be still. And smoking marijuana was a method that I've been using to calm myself down, to be able to keep my mind still, so I can be able to learn that I was actually orbiting. He was teaching me how to master myself, to learn that I was just orbiting around the earth and we're just rotating, and we actually live day by day, but we have to realize it was actually one rotation. The earth has been rotating on the same axis as the as soon as he began creating. It was only one rotation that's been going around and around, and all we've been doing is living out history and living out time through this one rotation, and it has not changed ever since he created reality and created existence. It's actually been one creation, and then we have to understand that it's not, we're just actually calculating time, but it's actually been one rotation. And I get to see how he moves the stars and while living on one, and I had to be still to actually realize that it's peaceful in the rotation. He just let there be. He placed us here to just be, and to see that I can sit still and realize this. I was going around with my own imagination on what was and what wasn't, and I had to sit still to see what his purpose actually was for myself, and actually see the purpose of what it was that he actually wanted from his creation, which was just a friendship. And us going around with ourselves, we actually put a perspective out there that really wasn't real. And it's kind of scary on how we're acting on things that weren't there. And he wanted us to enjoy the rotation. As I'm getting older, I'm growing as a plant, basically, and plants wither away, and I have to realize that my body's withering away, but my conscious had to grow through his intellect. My conscious is not aging as my body is aging, because I can be a 50-year-old thinking like a 5-year-old. So what's aging my intellect? What's causing me to age intellectually? It will be how he structured it in his law, so I can see myself rotating in his creation. So I had to understand that it was his will to preserve myself and my environment around me, which makes me his apprentice. I'll have to take that will on as a way of my being, so I can articulate to you on how we're preserving ourselves and how we're depleting ourselves. And it's a different perception to see how he committed genocide without physically harming me. He didn't want to kill me. He just wanted me to see what creation was really about, which was my human inheritance. I wanted to know why. Why am I here? When am I here? And how am I here? And being able to sit still the way I do, I was just noticing that I was orbiting, which means we're all just orbiting, going off whatever, reacting off of whatever floats through our mind, and we're not having a clear understanding of who we are, because we're not taking out the time to sit still and understand what's going on around us. You have to be able to take self-accountability and get the education and get the understanding on what's going on, so I can be able to actually live a graceful human life, and be able to say I took everything that God gave me and I applied it to myself and applied it to my environment. And I can stand in his face and say that I gave my all to you as you gave your all to me, and we both had the door open. And I was able to shine, you were able to shine your light through me as I let the door open to you. I have to let my ego aside so you can see God and see the love that he gave me, to know that it is real, because some people don't think it's real because they weren't treated right ever since they were a kid. You've been traumatized, so your perception of life was detoured. And you have to learn how to put your life and trauma in a perspective where the God didn't want that to happen to you. That wasn't his will. That was somebody else's will to change. That changed your demeanor. It was our reaction towards each other that was changing the perception of what life was really about. And I felt like that wasn't right because it's a manipulative mindset, and God always frowned upon it going through the history of the Bible, and they never died with grace. They died dramatically, and they all had to learn how our Father really was the hard way because they deliberately went against his will, and that was warranted and justified because it was always to preserve creation, not deplete it and let it wither gracefully and be appreciated for what it was at the time of its prime, which was always it was always in its prime as soon as it was spoken into existence. People say your prime is in your young days, but your prime was always there until the day you go see him. It's because we put stipulations on each other on what it looks like. We feel like, well, my time is running out. I'm getting a certain age, so I don't have time to do this, or I don't have time to do that. You're making a whole bunch of excuses on why you can't utilize the time that was given to you. You're still here. You're still in your prime. You're still getting up. You're still eating. You're still living. You're still walking. You're still talking. You're still thinking. So it's up to you on what you want to do with that time, and that you can't. Excuse me. You can't allow somebody else's perception of your situation hinder you from becoming what you could be. And then you're getting older, saying shoulda, coulda, woulda, and a whole lot of time's going by, and you feel like you're having anxiety, you're depressed, and you're taking a whole lot of drugs, and you're drinking, and you're trying to fornicate it away, and that's energy you could be putting into actually doing what you want to do. It's not what somebody else says, it's what you say to yourself. And that's what self-mastery is all about, is what you say to yourself, like the woman with the issue of blood. It was what she said to herself that healed her. And it's what I say to myself that heals me. And learning that it works for me, that's how I encourage others. It's what you say to yourself that gets you up and going. And it's what God says to me that gets me up and going, because he said this to himself to get himself up and going. Because if he had doubts within himself, within his creation, then we wouldn't know what courage looked like. We wouldn't know what strength looked like. We wouldn't know what love looked like. We wouldn't know how to walk, talk, or think. So seeing how he mastered himself, it encouraged me to master myself within his will, and that's how I'm learning to elaborate what preserves us as society. So as I end this video, I just want you to understand that I'm not really trying to hide who I am. I'm not trying to detour anybody. I'm not trying to make myself look like the best guy in the world. I'm actually just want to be Tim, and I want to contribute to society, and I want you to understand that I want to give you a good picture of our Father's character. He's actually a good father. He's not the punisher. That he is a punisher, but he just wants you to see the good side of him instead of the side that we're trying to trigger to change his demeanor. That's what gets the punishment. What gets the blessing is partnering with him and being able to get his message out to the world that we're preserving each other and not depleting each other. So I'm getting my vision of peace out there, my message out there. I have an event on the 30th for entrepreneurs, and I have a speaker speaking about entrepreneurship, the use of money, marketing, branding, and exit strategy in Carson. I will be marketing that on social media. I will put my links down where you can follow me, Vision of Peace, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. It will be at 5 o'clock in Carson, May 30th. We'll be talking about self-preservation and how it takes self-mastery and being able to put things in perspective for us to get the utopia that we're looking for. So have a good day and stay positive. It's about keeping a positive mindset that gets you to where you need to be, because we're actually sitting here as a family. It shouldn't be about who looks better, who doing better, who get paid more, or race, what color you are, or what gender you are, what sexuality you are. It's about sticking together and being able to utilize the gifts that God gave us through the intellect that we put in of learning yourself. So make sure you learn who you are, what you are, and when you are, so you can pass it on to the next generation for them to preserve themselves. So put things in perspective and put God first.